Well, hey there. My name is Jennifer Roskamp. I am a certified life coach, and I am here to give you a little bit of coaching today. And I'm going to tell you, you're probably not going to like what I have to say, but that's okay. Because sometimes we need to hear the hard stuff, right? So I'm just telling you right off the bat, this is probably going to be one of those things you don't want to hear, but it's so good. So stick around. All right. So this is probably one of the most helpful things I can ever tell you. I'm going to tell you what it is, and then I'm going to also give you some steps to help you overcome or offset it. Okay. So here's the part that you're not probably going to like, but it's so good. All right. Here it is. When it comes to failure or making mistakes, this is what is universally true. You can either learn from it or you can choose to repeat it. Because in most cases, if you're not learning from it, actively learning from it, and I've got some steps that are going to help you do this, but in reality, if you're not actively choosing to learn something from it, you're probably going to repeat it. So I said this to one of my kids over the weekend. And again, it might seem like it's kind of a harsh thing, but we had already taken some important steps before I said this to him. So what happened is over the weekend, I had 5 of my kids were in a swim meet, and it was a really bad day for a few of them and a really good day for a couple of them. But the ones that had a really bad day, we needed to do a little life coaching. And so I took my son, so he did not swim well, right? He was mad, he was frustrated, he was disappointed, he was all the things. And here's what we did though, is I took him through this 3-step process to help him move forward from it, right? Because what did we not want to do? We don't want to repeat it. Okay. So step number 1, when you need to, again, when you're saying, yeah, I don't want to repeat it, so how can I learn from it? Here's what to do. Here's what it actually means, learning from it. It means number 1, that you have to look at it, right? Look at whatever it is, the problem, the situation, look at it from all sides, really examine it. Think of it like a puzzle, and I need to see all the puzzle pieces. That's step 1, is to really look at what happened and make sure you have all the pieces, okay? Step number 2 is to take ownership, right? When there's a mistake or there's failure, there's gonna be at least some of it that you have to take ownership of, because there's gonna be aspects of every situation that you are responsible for, right? It could be that you're not the only one. It could be that there were some what I call outside factors. Some of these outside factors might also play a role. But in reality, if you want to, again, learn from it, you have to be able to, step number 2, take ownership of what belongs on your shoulders, okay? And then step number 3 is to ask yourself, what can I learn, right? What can I learn from it? You have to ask yourself, yes, these things happened. I looked at all the puzzle pieces, and that was step 1. Step 2, this belongs on my shoulders. Now you're ready to actually say to yourself, all right, now that I understand what part of it is mine to carry, here's how I can learn from it. And again, if you don't want to repeat it, you're going to have to find something, right? So that's kind of the first step in the process. And what made me say to my son, you can either learn from it or you can choose to repeat it, is because we had already worked through these steps, and he kept coming back to the frustration. He kept coming back to the disappointment and to the mad and to the sad. But in reality, when you actually follow these 3 steps and choose to learn from it, you don't have to feel those things anymore, because now you're back into what I call the driver's seat, right? When in his situation, when he was mad and sad and disappointed, it was really him sitting in what I call the back seat, right? Where he was feeling all the things about it, and it happened, but he was just kind of stuck in the negative feelings and in the remembering. That is very back seat. Nothing is ever going to get better from the back seat. So those 3 steps then put him back in the driver's seat. And that's where we become empowered. And that is where we can have some say-so, just like when you're driving a car, where you can have some say-so over what actually is happening and where you actually are going. Okay? So those 3 steps, right? Look at it, examine it, take ownership of what's yours, and then ask, what can I learn from it? But interestingly, you probably won't like this any more than you liked hearing the reality, but now you can trust me, right? You know it's good. You know I'm going to give you something good here. This is, again, something I would take my coaching clients through. Okay. So now we've kind of parked ourselves in the learning, right? And we've figured out what we can learn from it. We've come up with some things that we can learn about it. In my son's case, we came up with the idea that you can't be so focused on just swimming so fast that you lose your mind and forget how to swim a legal stroke, right? You can't be so focused on winning that you're also not thinking about how to legally swim, right? That was among the things that he could learn from it. But then you have to continue going from there, right? Once you've learned, learning isn't enough, right? So this is where, again, it might not be something that you necessarily want to hear, but when I share these with you, you'll see that it's true, and you'll be armed and ready with some coaching wisdom the next time you've got a mistake or you're trying to bounce back from failure again because you don't want to repeat it, okay? So there's always work to do, right? In this phase, these 3 steps, you've done some work already, but your work isn't done, okay? You've also got to do these 3 things. If you're raising your hand and saying, I don't want to repeat it, I want a different result, and you're in the driver's seat now because, and you've come up with some ways that you're going to get a different result, now this is what you need to do. Number 1, you need to show up again, right? If you have to show up again. So often we think about, and it's kind of cliche to hear, like, all you have to do is show up. All you have to do is show up. Like, just show up for yourself, right? If you've ever heard that, right? I know I've heard that. Just show up for yourself. And I'm here to say that's not enough, right? You can't just show up and expect that somehow you are going to be able to manipulate something into getting whatever result it is you're trying to get. It's not enough just to show up. Your presence isn't just enough, okay? But that is the next step in the process, is to show up. But then you have to follow that up with number 2, which is try. I say it to people all the time. I say it to clients. I say it to my kids. Show up and try. Show up and try. Show up and try. They go together, right? It's not enough to say that cliche of just show up. Just show up for yourself. You have to show up, and number 2, try. But it also actually requires a 3rd thing. And here's what that is. Anytime you're going to show up and try, and especially kind of bounce back, or I call it ricocheting from a mistake or a failure, because we want to stay in failure, mistake land as little as possible. We want to be able to say, ouch, that hurt, right? Whatever the failure was, whatever the mistake was, like, they're painful, right? But you want to be able to say, wow, that hurt, but you want to ricochet off and start on this process, right? Of looking at the pieces, taking ownership, and then asking what you can learn, and then setting it into motion by showing up and trying, okay? But this 3rd piece is also required, and that is that you have to be willing to fail or make a mistake again, because that's the reality that we live in. Every time you try to do something, every time you start doing something, every time you show up and try, there is always the possibility that you will not get the results you're looking for, which could then be classified as failure, which I have a huge problem with that word, but that's a whole nother conversation. Something that could be labeled as failure or a mistake, right? But the reality is that you have to be willing to have that be the outcome or the results. You do have to entertain the idea that that could happen, and yes, that it could happen again. But here's what we know to be true. The success also won't happen. If you say, let me just say it this way. If you were to say, yeah, I don't want to fail again, so I'm not going to try. The reality, and this is again where I had to kind of get into the coaching arena with my kids a little bit, you're also not going to succeed if you don't show up and try. You do have to entertain the possibility that it might not go your way, but it certainly isn't going to go your way if you don't even get in the water and swim. That is the only way to have the outcome guaranteed. The only way to have the outcome guaranteed in anything is if you don't show up and you don't try. If you don't even throw your hat in the ring, you have no possibility of getting that result you're after. So again, failure and mistakes, like, they're hard, right? And it's really hard. I gave you some steps here today, but know that I understand it's hard. It's hard for you to do that. It's hard for me to do that. It's hard for my clients to do that. It's hard for everybody to do that. But it is always, always, always possible that you're also going to achieve the result you're after. And that feels pretty awesome. So again, when mistakes and failure happen, you get to choose what you're going to do with them. Are you going to choose to learn from it, or are you going to not learn anything from it and have to do it again and probably end up with the same result? That's the question to ask yourself is, do I want the same result or do I want a different result? And most times I would think that you're going to answer, you know what? I would like a different result here. Here's how to get it. I am happy to share more coaching tips with you. Let me know in the comments. Say coaching. I'll send some your way.